I didn't move. The hum of the cabin, the scraping of suitcases above me, the cheerful chatter of passengers gathering their belongings, it all moved around me like a blur. I stayed seated, phone in hand, the folded flag still in my carry-on bag under the seat. Ivan would have hated turbulence, but he would have loved a controlled landing. He'd always said that flying was nothing but a controlled fall. I'd never found comfort in that. The message was pre-written. Simple, no punctuation, no exclamation marks. Just, flight lands at 4 p.m. Can anyone come pick me up? I sent it to the family group chat. The one with the heart next to the name. The one they use for birthday reminders and surprise dinner invitations. I wasn't expecting any celebration. I wasn't expecting a parade. I just didn't want to stand on the platform alone. After burying the man I loved in a country I'd never intended to visit. The reply came quickly. Tessa, we're busy. Try an Uber. Minutes later, Mom chimed in. Mom, you should have planned better. No, how was the funeral? No, we're so sorry. No, we're proud of him. Her words were cold, dry, and curt. I stared at the screen. My fingers went numb. For a moment, I considered calling, not to argue, just to ask again. Maybe gently this time. But then I remembered the silence at the graveside, the empty folding chairs on either side. I typed back, don't worry. I turned off my phone, slipped it into my coat pocket, and stood as the line slowly moved forward. I didn't need a ride anymore. I didn't need anything from them at all. As I crossed the airport terminal and stepped into the clear, late afternoon light, I already knew who was waiting for me. Germany was cold in a way I hadn't anticipated. Not the kind that cuts through the skin, but the kind that seeps in deeply like grief. The air outside the church was still. Everything was still. Uniforms stood in neat rows, boots pounded into the gravel, faces unreadable, except mine. They asked if I wanted music. I said no. Ivan didn't like performances. They asked if I wanted words. I said I couldn't bear them. So, they gave me silence, precision, and 21 sharp sounds that pierced the sky. The flag was folded so tightly it felt like a stone in my hands. I didn't cry when they handed it to me. I had already cried on the plane, in the sterile hotel room, and in the bathroom between meetings with the liaison officer. What broke me wasn't the ceremony. It was the empty chairs beside me. Reserved rows with names printed precisely, untouched. One for Gina, one for my mother, and one for everyone Ivan was family to. As the final salute was given and the last rifle lowered, a female Marine approached. Young, perhaps in her mid-20s, her face impassive. She didn't smile. She didn't linger. She bowed just enough for me to hear her voice. We'll be there when you arrive. I nodded, though I didn't quite understand what she meant. And perhaps she hadn't meant for me to nod. Later that evening, I returned to the base's guest quarters and opened my bag to place the flag. Next to it was a small card. No name, just an address and phone number. The last line read, "An escort will be arranged upon arrival. You won't be alone." And indeed, I wasn't. As I stepped out of the lounge, my coat buttoned up, the flag in hand, I saw them. Sliding doors opened, car horns wailed, suitcase wheels scraped against the pavement, and families waved through open windows. I walked past it all. No one called my name. No one waved from across the truck lane, and I didn't slow down to look. I kept going until I saw her. A black SUV parked by the curb, clean and stable. The front passenger got out first, a tall woman in a blue uniform, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete. Then a second woman stepped out, older, with neatly styled silver hair and a straight, stoic posture. The third, a man younger than both of them, walked quietly and steadily toward me. No one said a word. He reached for my bag. I didn't resist, I let it go. The woman opened the back door and gave a single nod. I took a step forward, the flag pressing against my chest. I felt its weight now, not just because of the memories, but because of the meaning. Inside, the car was warm and quiet. I sat on the leather seat without adjusting anything. The older woman closed the door behind me, then turned and sat in the driver's seat. We drove off smoothly, as if they had done so before, perhaps because they had done so through the window. I watched other passengers hugging, their arms intertwined, their faces buried in their coats, tears catching in the middle of laughter. A man lifted a small child into the air. A college girl clung to her father's neck. I looked ahead. No one asked me how the journey was going. No one asked me what had happened outside. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. The absence of casual conversation wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. It made room for something heavier. At the first red light, the Marine in the passenger seat glanced at me. He wasn't going to say anything, just to make me feel the change in the atmosphere. I tightened my grip on the flag and closed my eyes. The stillness that enveloped me wasn't peace. Not yet, but it was the closest I'd felt in days. I didn't check my phone. I didn't open the group chat. I stared straight ahead as the city sped past, waiting for the world to catch up. That night, I didn't turn on the television. I sat by the hotel room window, still in the same clothes. The flag was neatly folded on the chair beside me. The city moved beneath me, cars whizzing through intersections, headlights gliding on the wet pavement. I didn't eat dinner. I didn't reply to any messages. I didn't send any. I didn't need to. At 9 p.m., the screens of millions of homes switched to a still image of me getting into a black SUV. 3 Marines in full uniform stood behind me. The news anchor's voice was calm and steady, the kind they use when something tragic but solemn happens tonight. A widow had returned home from her husband's military funeral abroad. No family was at the gate, but she wasn't alone. They showed the full segment as I walked through the arrivals hall, past families reuniting through sliding doors into the care of uniformed strangers. The camera stayed still long enough for the folded flag in my arms to catch a glimpse. Then, as I climbed into the SUV, the Marines took up positions behind me, forming a silent wall. The screen flipped to a single page. The note I'd jotted down hours earlier and handed to the station's producer without fanfare. If you find yourself alone on the edge of grief, don't look back. Look for those who come forward. ML. They didn't use my full name, but they didn't have to. I could picture the moment the news broke in my mother's living room. I knew which cupboard held her wine glass, and I could almost hear it hit the table. I knew my sister's apartment would be dark, and if it weren't for the TV's flickering light, I would have known the sound of cutlery clinking against porcelain. When the room fell silent after the story I'd buried resurfaced, none of them texted. Not yet, but the silence that had protected them no longer belonged to them. It belonged to everyone now. The newscast ended. The image faded, and somewhere behind the broadcast, behind the formalities, the uniforms, and the quotes, the story began to shift, not because I demanded it, but because the truth doesn't need permission to be heard. The message arrived just before midnight. Tessa, were you on the news? It wasn't an apology. It wasn't I didn't know. Not even are you okay? Just a 6-word question, flimsy and hollow, as if doubt might spare her some guilt. I didn't reply. I turned off the screen and placed the phone upside down on the bedside table. Minutes later, I opened the group chat out of habit. I hadn't meant to, but there it was, still pinned up at the top, still labeled family, though the word sounded foreign to me now. It was the last message I still had. Okay. I scrolled up. Tessa's reply. My mother's criticism. Nothing else. Then I noticed the updated group photo. Someone had changed it. A new one filled the corner. Jenna and I, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing side by side in an Independence Day parade, holding little flags. The caption below was hers. I could make out, family first, always. I stared at it longer than I intended, not because it moved me, but because the disconnection was so complete, it felt almost surreal. They hadn't shown up at the airport. They hadn't called after the funeral. They hadn't even texted until my name was making headlines all over town. Below the photo, someone commented, "She didn't even come to pick her up." It got 10 likes, then 15, then more. The replies from strangers poured in. I watched the count rise unread. Then I pressed and held the chat window until the list appeared. I selected delete, confirmed, and let it disappear. It didn't feel light, but it did feel clean. I went back to the window. Same city, same lights. The flag was still hanging on the chair, folded into that impossible triangle. I wondered if they knew its weight. The email arrived at 12:37 a.m. Subject. Follow-up from Channel 8. Luxley Fitness. Thank you for your quiet strength earlier this evening. We received tremendous feedback on your segment. If you'd like to follow up, we'd love to hear more from you. No pressure. Just let us know. No pressure. They didn't realize how odd that sounded after all. I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply box, then shut down my laptop. It wasn't about attention. It was about ownership. The world saw the edges, but not the essence, which cost me getting through the airport with my head held high. What it felt like standing next to an empty chair at Ivan's grave. None of that was told. And maybe it was time. The interview wasn't live. That helped. They asked if I wanted makeup. I said no. Did I want to prepare my answers? No. Did I want to bring someone with me? I already did. Ivan was present in every word I intended to say. The studio wasn't what I'd expected, small. Quiet, dimly lit, nothing artificial. Just one chair, a table, 2 microphones, and a woman with gentle eyes who introduced herself only as Sage. We can stop at any time, she said. You don't have to say anything you don't want to say. I nodded. They checked the microphone, adjusted the camera once, and then we began. Sage leaned forward, not as a journalist, but as someone who had read the story and knew there was more to it than that. Her first question came quietly. What happened when you landed? I took a breath. Not a deep one, just enough. I buried my husband with pride. I said that, and went home to find silence. She didn't interrupt me. She didn't seem to be quiet. I let the sentence sink in. I told her about the folded flag, the empty chairs at the funeral, the black SUV that had been waiting outside the hall. I told her about the Marines, how they had stood behind me, not out of duty but out of respect. She asked me about the chat group. I shook my head. I wasn't going to name names. It wasn't about shame. It was about absence and presence. I said it quietly, not with affected eloquence, but with the stillness that comes when a wound feels long enough to leave a scar. People say grief is noisy, but it isn't. Grief is what you hear when nobody you've been counting on says anything. The segment went on for 12 minutes. No music, no dramatic editing, just my voice as it was, just the truth, left to speak for itself. When we finished, Sage reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She didn't say a word. I was grateful for that. Later that evening, the report aired in prime time, between the local weather forecast and a report on the mayor's speech. In between, I watched my life unfold on screen, calmly and clearly without apology. The phone started ringing less than an hour later. But I didn't check it. Instead, I opened a blank notebook and scribbled 5 words at the top of a white page. The first stage of my welcome project. The morning after the interview aired, I woke to a number of emails I'd never seen before in my inbox. Some were short. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. Others were long, branching letters from military widows and wives, and even civilians who had never worn a uniform but knew the meaning of silence. One veteran from Arizona wrote, "I remember coming home to an empty terminal. You expressed something I'd buried years ago. There were flowers, too. I never decided where to send them, but they arrived anyway. White lies, dark blue ribbon, a folded note that simply read, 'For the courage we all needed.' I didn't know what to do with all this at first. I wasn't trying to start anything. I was just trying to end the conversation my family refused to have, but the messages kept coming. Then someone asked, 'Do you know if there's a way to meet people like you at the airport? Just one person, anyone to come over?' That was the moment everything changed. I opened my notebook again and wrote one sentence. No one should come back to a house where there is silence. Within 48 hours, I had a name, The Welcome Project. By the end of the week, I had a website, simple but functional. A friend of Evan's helped me build it. Volunteers started signing up from different cities. A woman from Charlotte offered to organize the first welcome team. Someone from Chicago sent a donation for signage. Day 10. JFK Airport. First welcome team. A woman named Rebecca stood just outside the arrivals hall, holding a handwritten sign that read, "We are with you." The photo was already online before I even saw it. The wife of a service member who had just returned from burying her partner in Kuwait. She stood weeping in Rebecca's arms. They had never met. It didn't matter. That night, Rebecca texted me. She said it was the first time since the funeral that someone had looked her in the eye and called her by name. I put down my phone and typed, "Thank you." I kept playing until my wrist ached. Then I turned over and circled a city. The next stop, Atlanta. The memorial service was held in the city park under the broad elms, just before sunset. No podium, no speeches, just rows of folding chairs, paper lanterns, and candles placed at the gate. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I stood at the back, my hood pulled down, my hands tucked into my coat. Next to me, a woman I didn't know held a candle in both hands and whispered a name I couldn't hear. At the front, a girl stepped forward to sing. She couldn't have been more than 16. Her voice broke on the third line, but she didn't stop. "I'll carry you home," she sang, her breath trembling, each note falling as if designed for a specific place. The people around me began to cry. Not loud sobs, but quiet tears that slid down their cheeks as if they had been waiting. I didn't cry, but my throat ached with the weight of what I'd held back. Then I saw them through the crowd near the edge of the trees. Tessa stood motionless, her arms folded, her shoulders rigid, and beside her my mother, dressed in black, her hair pulled back, with the same solemn expression she wore at every church service in my childhood. They weren't on the program. They hadn't donated. They hadn't helped light a single candle. They had simply watched. They hadn't come closer. They hadn't waved. Neither had I. Someone in front of me recognized my name and patted me on the shoulder. There was a soft clap at first, then it grew louder. I stood there and let it pass. Not to draw attention to myself, but for the sake of truth. Because in that moment, surrounded by strangers, I felt more visible than ever at a family dinner. And somewhere beyond the line of sight, they saw it too. The message arrived the next morning. I was sitting on the floor surrounded by brown boxes and rolls of tape, separating shampoo bottles from granola bars. The apartment smelled like a mixture of cardboard and lavender. Gina didn't think it mattered much. I didn't know how to help her. I read the message 3 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I knew exactly what it was. A sentence trying to reach me, but stopping short of getting to anything real. "No, I'm sorry. No, I should have been there." Just an expression of bewilderment like that might somehow lessen the weight of what I hadn't done. I put the phone down and stared at the open care bag beside me. Inside were a handwritten card, a travel blanket, lip balm, tissues, instant coffee, and a small note that read, "You're not alone." I picked up the phone again and typed, "You left me when I needed you most." I deleted it. I typed, "I hope you never feel what I felt." I deleted that too. Then I sat still for a moment. The kind of stillness that doesn't hurt anymore. It just lingers. Finally, I typed, "You've made up your mind." "And so have I." I sent it. I didn't wait for a reply. I knew there wouldn't be one, or if there was, it would be too late and meaningless, and I wouldn't need it anymore. I closed the box, put it by the door, and reached for another. Because some things can't be fixed with words. They're transformed by actions, by names you haven't yet heard. By hands that reach out without asking why you're broken. That day, surrounded by care kits and shipping labels, I wasn't waiting to heal. I was already building what was to come. The article came out in early spring. I didn't know it would be front page until I saw it through the newsstand window on the corner. My picture was printed large above the fold, my head held high, my hand resting on the shoulder of a young woman holding a folded flag. Her eyes were red. Her smile was fragile. The headline read, "From Grief to Ground Crew. How a Widow Changed When She Came Home." I bought 3 copies, not out of pride, but to remember where the story began. A week later, I was invited to speak at a local memorial service for military families. I almost refused, but something inside told me it was time. They handed me the microphone. I went home alone. I said that, but I didn't stay alone. I didn't talk about my sister. I didn't talk about my mother. I spoke of the weight of absence, of the feeling when strangers become part of me, when grief grasps hands I've never held before. There was no applause when I finished, just a silence that felt respectful. Afterward, I headed straight to the airport. No one had told me to. It just felt right. On Flight 645 from Dallas, there was only one name. A woman whose husband had died in a training accident 6 weeks earlier. I stood at the gate holding a sign with her name and 4 words underneath. "We are with you now." When I reached the corner, my eyes scanning the area, my shoulders tense, I smiled because this time I wasn't waiting for anyone to come for me. I was already there.
अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं, ये जो दिन सहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं। तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा बेसर्द लगता है। दिल का हर एक कोना अब बहुत ही दूर भरता है। अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं, ये जो दिन सुहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं। तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा सर्द लगता है। दिल का हर एक कोना बहुत ही दर्द भरता है। मेरे साए भी मुझसे अब जुदा होने को कहते हैं। तुझे खोने की राहों में ये आंसू बहने लगते हैं। कहाँ जाऊँ कहाँ ढूंढूं मेरा वो साजो सामा, तो मेरी हर एक तमन्ना तू, मेरी ही रूह का मकां तू। लकीरों में नहीं लिखा जो तुमने ख्वाब देखा था। वफा की इस कहानी में फकत एक गम ही लिखा था। सितारों से भी पूछता है पता तेरा कहाँ होगा, मगर खामोश है दुनिया कहाँ मेरा जहाँ होगा। बस एक बार मुड़ के देख ले मेरी बेबसी की सूरत। मुझे है आज भी तेरी वफा की सख्त जरूरत। साए मेरे तन्हा सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर। साए मेरे तन्हा सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर, दर्द का असर।